Hey, what's going on? Luke here, and tomorrow is the opener of the 2021 State of Origin Series, New South Wales versus Queensland. This is going to be a Queensland home game. It wasn't always going to be a Queensland home game. It was obviously supposed to be held in Melbourne, but due to all the COVID restrictions, it had to be moved, and now it's going to be played at Townsville. So that means that Queensland will end up playing 3 home games in a row, essentially. Last year, they played Game 3 at a home stadium. Obviously, they're playing home stadium right now in Townsville. I know it's not their normal stadium, but this is still a home stadium. And then, obviously, Game 2 is a home game for them, but it's going to be at Suncorp. So I think, first off, I just want to say, huge advantage to Queensland. I mean, you can always go through all the lineups, you compare all the lineups, player for player, and you can say, oh yeah, New South Wales got a better side, or Queensland's got a better side. But we just know when it comes to Origin, Queensland just have that spirit for Origin. So even if Queensland don't have the better side on paper, I feel like they still come out and they just have way more intensity, way more passion for it. So them having a home crowd, I think it's going to be a huge advantage for them. In that saying though, I think the New South Wales Blues, if there was ever a year for them to be more equipped to sort of handle this sort of pressure, I think it would be this year. We've got a new halves pairing, we've got Nathan Cleary and Jarome Luai. We've also got Tommy Trbojevic back in the side. Damien Cook's still there. Pretty much we have all the guys that should have been picked. I know in previous years, Brad Fittler's selections have been a little bit puzzling at times, but I feel like going into this game, I'm super confident of the team that he's actually picked. I feel like it's pretty much the team that I would have picked. The only one I'm really sort of umming and ahhing about is Tariq Sims, and I've sort of made that clear. But then when you actually think about it, like who should replace him? I mean, there's like Ryan Madison, Tavita Pengo Jr., but there's no one who's super consistent or hasn't been injured and stuff. And Tariq Sims has actually been playing half decent as of late. So I suppose in the end, he's a guy who's played Origin before, and I think he will step up. But it's just a matter of like, you go from having Boyd Corden, Angus Crichton, even like Josh Jacksons and all those sort of guys. Tyson Frizzell would have been there. You go through all of those guys, even Pengo Jr. and stuff, and then all of a sudden we end up with Tariq Sims. So it definitely does seem a weak point, especially considering the Queensland back row has got Dave Fafita and Big Tino in there. It's just, and Felice Kafusi as well. It's just such a strong back row. And then you look at the Blues, you've got Cameron Murray, who's generally not a back rower, or generally not a second rower anyways, I should say. Usually at the lock position, and instead he's in the back row. And then obviously Isaiah at the lock position, he definitely earned that position for me. And I feel like I'm talking about New South Wales a lot at the moment, but that's just how we're going. So Isaiah, I think he's going to have a good combination with Jarome Luai and Nathan Cleary, and I think him being there and starting, not coming off the bench, I'm pretty sure he came off the bench last year, I think just the fact that he's there, I think it will calm them down a lot. And then having Tedesco at the back, look, he's been in some pretty decent form for the Roosters in sort of a side that's not travelling that well as of late. So I think him going into the blue side and having such a big forward pack and such a good team in general around him, I think he'll really step up. And I think Nathan Cleary will play off the back of that. And I'm expecting a big game from Nathan Cleary. And I think a lot of it's going to come down to the fact that he's got Jarome Luai there. Now, the last big game that they played in, especially together, was the grand final. Obviously, Nathan Cleary didn't play well in the last Origin series, in my opinion. I know he had a decent game in Game 2, I think it was. The game that they won, he was pretty instrumental in that game. But obviously, when the pressure was on, he didn't stand up. And the same was for the grand final. And the same thing happened to Jarome Luai in that game. So I'm a little bit worried in that sense. But and also just due to the fact that Queensland's side are so clutch. And no matter who they put in their side, even like fullback. They won last year with Corey Allen at fullback. He couldn't even play fullback for the Bulldogs at this point. And I think that says it all. The fact that they still won with him there, and just a lot of those guys. You had your Edric Lees, Bronco Lees, those sort of guys who were sort of fringe players. I know a lot has been said about, oh, well, Queensland, like, did they have the worst side ever? Oh, well, they still won. How embarrassing. No, I think they literally had the worst Queensland side. You look at the sides that they've fielded in the past, you know, your Lockyers, your Thurston, your Cameron Smiths, all that sort of stuff. And then going into the side that they had last year, definitely was a downgrade, and New South Wales blue side was fairly strong. So on paper, New South Wales should have wiped 4 of them, but that's what I mean. Queensland just have that Queensland spirit, and the fact that it's being played at Townsville does worry me a bit. Now, Andrew Johns has come out and said that the actual stadium should favour the Blues in terms of there rather than Melbourne, but I feel like we played pretty decent in Melbourne, to be honest. I kind of just have in my head all the wins have been sort of at Melbourne. I don't know if that's a statistical thing, but just off the top of my head, it's what it feels like. I still remember Tommy Turbo killing it in Melbourne. So I feel like it is a place where, you know, it's not a home ground for New South Wales, but it is a decent ground for us. Definitely not Suncorp. So I feel like Townsville, they're going to have that home field advantage, and they shouldn't really have it, but hey, it is what it is. Now, I just want to talk about some actual matchups. Obviously, the halves battle is a huge one. I've already talked about New South Wales a lot, but I'm going to start talking about Queensland a bit. Obviously, Queensland have Munter and Cherry Evans, and that's a huge thing for them. Cherry Evans is so experienced. He's done it all. He can step up to the plate. He's a pretty good captain too. Manly's travelling well, which is a good thing. Usually going into Origin as of late, Manly have been playing like shit, and then he comes in Origin and has to step it up. Whereas Manly have actually been playing pretty well. So he's got form going into Origin rather than just trying to come into Origin and step up. And obviously, Cameron Munster's Cameron Munster. He played last season. He played the last series hungover and he absolutely killed it. Was player of the series. Pretty much single-handedly destroyed New South Wales. And I know that's a big thing to say that he single-handedly did it, but I mean, he pretty much did. He was very, very good, Cameron Munster. And imagine how good he's going to be when he's not hungover. So I'm expecting a big series from Cameron Munster. At fullback, Valentine Holmes, expecting him to be here. And I'm actually recording this on Monday, so I don't know what the official lineup's going to be. There's a lot of talk about Ben Hunt. He's just been called into the squad officially. And Reid Marnie's obviously out. He got injured this past weekend, but I don't think he was ever going to play. Harry Grant was named at 9. And then we got Ben Hunt as well there. I think he'll come onto the bench for AJ Brimson. I think Brimson's going to end up pulling out. A lot of talk about him being injured. And I think the fact that they didn't slot Brimson straight into the number 1 position when Ponga went down, I think it kind of does back up the fact that he isn't going to be fit. So if like Brimson on the bench or Ben Hunt, I think Ben Hunt offers a lot more. Because like realistically, where do you play Brimson? I mean, if there's injuries that happen, you can sort of shift Munter to the fullback or you can shift people around. Then you can bring on Ben Hunt. And if there's no injuries, straight into the hooker position. Because apparently Harry Grant probably isn't 100%, but they're going to go with him anyway. So yeah, I think Ben Hunt is a big inclusion for him. And I think for Origin level, I think he actually steps up. Now, I've already touched on the forward pack. I think the forward pack for Queensland is quite strong. Now, I know they don't necessarily have the big names, but I think you guys like Christian Welch and that, I think super underrated, and they always step up at Origin level. In fact, they just step up at every level. I mean, we saw the Storm this past week. They didn't have Christian Welch. They'd been winning without like your Munsters and all that sort of stuff, Pappenhausen and all that. And then as soon as Christian Welch goes out, then they look like shit. I know they got the win, but they definitely didn't look up to scratch. And I think Christian Welch is a big part of that. I think he's super underrated, and I think he was really, really good for them last year. And I was talking about Munter being player of the series, but Christian Welch wouldn't have been far off it. And I think he missed one of the games, and I think it was the game that New South Wales won. So I think he's a very influential player. Kind of under the radar. Everyone knows he's a good prop, but I don't think we realise just how good he is. And obviously the rest of the side, I've already touched on the back row. Super strong, but where it sort of does get weak for the Maroons, in my opinion, is sort of the back line. I think New South Wales definitely have a better back line. Latrell Mitchell is back for them. I really do rate the back line for the Blues. Addo Carr's there. Brian Suo. They've got the guys, they've got the speed, they've got the power. Tedesco's there. I think they've got the centres right this year. Look, the bench for the Maroons, though, is sort of the weak point for me, and I keep going all over the shop here. I'll talk about the bench and then I'll talk about the backs for the Maroons. So the bench for them, like you got Fodawaker, you got guys who like a Ben Hunt, you got guys who, for me, they don't stack up to the Blues bench. It's not necessarily that they're bad, but look at the Blues bench. You got Payne Haas, Junior Paulo, Jack Whiten, and also Liam Martin as well. So there's a good mix. You got guys who are big but also skillful, good motor, decent pace. So the Blues bench, I think it is very, very strong. And even Liam Martin, I think he cancels out sort of Tarek Sims. So even if Tarek Sims isn't playing the best, they can just chuck on Liam Martin and then like you're good to go. Liam Martin's a fantastic player. Whereas the Queensland bench, it just doesn't offer as much for me. And I feel like if the Blues are still in the game or on top of Queensland, I can't see the bench coming on and changing things. Whereas if Queensland are over New South Wales, I can see their bench coming on and just going gangbusters and sort of getting it over Queensland. So that's where I think there is a big difference. The back line, as I touched on, for the Queensland side, it isn't exactly super strong. Valentine Holmes apparently moving to fullback. I think you're going to have Xavier Coates, and I think Kyle Feld's going to come onto the wing. So you got some pretty decent wingers. Xavier Coates, for me, he's definitely raw. I thought he was really good last year for Queensland, and he's got that athletic prowess, but I feel like he's susceptible to being found out this year. You got Kurt Capewell, he's not really a centre, and he was fantastic for them. Another one last year could have been player of the series. He was absolutely killing it, but this time he's going to be coming up against Tom Trbojevic and Latrell Mitchell, both of who weren't there last year. And Dane Gagai, I think Dane Gagai holds his own, but apparently he's pretty sick going into this game as well. So there's another question mark over the Queensland side. But look, on paper, the New South Wales side definitely is stronger, but we all know that means nothing going into Origin. So don't want to really talk about it too much. And I think Queensland have enough big game plays. You guys like Harry Grant, we saw how good he was last year. We know what he's capable of. You got Cameron Munter, Cherry Evans, even Valentine Holmes, I think is capable of doing it at Origin level at fullback. So look, Queensland have a lot of big game plays, and I think that could sort of overcome the New South Wales skills. But look, realistically, I'm going to have to go New South Wales here. I'm going to give my predictions. I think New South Wales is going to win this one. I do think it will be close. I do think it will be a 1-12. I think it will be a close one where sort of I feel like Queensland will get the lead at some point. New South Wales will have the lead or sort of go back and forth. And I think New South Wales will eventually run away with it. Not run away with it, but they'll eventually get the win. In terms of man of the match, I'm actually going to go with James Tedesco. I also think he's going to get first try scorer as well. I feel like James Tedesco, he's one of those sort of players where New South Wales lost last year. He's going to be embarrassed. He's the captain of the side. I think between him and like Tom Trbojevic or Latrell Mitchell, I think one of those guys will sort of get man of the match. I think Cleary, obviously, if New South Wales win and he has a half decent game, him or Lawar definitely be contenders for it. But for me, Tedesco, I think he's the one. He's the man for New South Wales. I think he'll step up, and I think he'll have a strong start to the game. He'll pick up first try scorer. I at least think he will score at some point, or he'll get knocked out. And that's another thing I want to touch on. I'm going to go for how many sim binnings will happen. Obviously, the new crackdown, it's going to be interesting to see how Origin is officiated, because we've been seeing a big crackdown on high shots and that. Obviously, it's sort of toned down a little bit to what it was at Magic Round, but it's still there. We're still seeing people get sim bin and sent off. So I'm gonna go for like a big intense game like this. I feel like there's definitely going to be some swinging arms at some point. Guys are going to be trying to hit each other hard. Obviously, it's going to be an accident, but they don't really care at this point. I think we're going to see 2 sim bins. I wouldn't be surprised if it's one from either side. They try and square it up a little bit. But yeah, I do think we're going to see some sim binnings. And I find it funny that it's actually something I can make a prediction on these days, because just in previous years I was like, oh, who cares? Sim bins rarely happen. Now it's like happening every game. So you can there should be a betting market for sim binnings. Anyways, that's my preview and my predictions for game 1. Leave in the comment section below, what are your predictions for the game? Do you think Queensland's going to win? Do you think New South Wales is going to win? Do you think it's going to be a good game in general? I personally think it's going to be a really good game. This is like last year. I feel like we got to the end of the season. Players were tired. We weren't necessarily getting the best players picked because players were injured, or like I said, just super tired and that. So I'm expecting a really, really good game. And look, I'm expecting New South Wales victory. So leave in the comment section below, who do you think is going to win? Also, who do you think is going to get man of the match? That's a pretty important one too. Anyways, if you did happen to enjoy this video, make sure you go ahead and smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Also, make sure to turn on the notification bell. It is pretty important in terms of you actually seeing these videos. Don't rely on the sub boxes. Use the notification bell. Don't even rely on just the YouTube sort of thing showing up. Just subscribe to the channel, use the notification bell, and don't miss any of my videos. It's as simple as that. Also, yeah, if you want to give me a follow on social media, it's on the screen right now. It's Mr. Luke on YT for the most part. Mr. Luke just for Facebook, but everything else is Mr. Luke on YT, as you can see on the screen right now. So go ahead, give me a follow, give me a like, do all that sort of stuff. And I've actually got another video coming out tomorrow. I'm going to go over my top 5 players to watch for Origin 1, so stay tuned for that. But also stay tuned for more stuff on the channel too. Going to be doing a review of Game 1, plenty of other stuff to talk about. The NRL is getting pretty juicy at the moment, so plenty of stuff to talk about. So yeah, like I said, stay tuned on the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. See yous!